Welcome to Ep.3, Vada Studios podcast, Studio Confessions. Today I have with me a multi-instrumentalist, a programmer, a songwriter, but most famously for being a drummer of bands like Pitch Shifter, This Is Menace, Populate Itself, just to mention a few, but currently most known for his position in Bullet For My Valentine. Welcome to the podcast, Jason Bold.
Hello.
Nice to have you here.
Nice to be here, Matt.
So we've been friends for quite some time. We've been working together on and off for like 25 years. And when I first met you, you were already the first person I'd ever met that used Logic. So you've been recording like forever.
Yeah, well, I think it all started really. I was always a bit of a geek when I was a kid. And I had a Spectrum like most people our age had when we were kids. And then I had an Atari. And I had this software called DigiDrum when I was about 11.
Right.
And I learned to program beats on it. And that's how I would design drum beats, sort of complex beats that I couldn't play that I needed to work out. And then I progressed to Cubase about 5 years later. And then Logic, kind of, I guess, mid-90s, I think. And that's when I met you, and that's when it was still owned by eMagic, before it was bought by Apple at the start of the noughties.
Yeah. So when was the first time you actually, I mean, obviously if you started working like that at 11, I imagine you would have been pretty self-sufficient for quite a long time. So when was the first time you actually went into a recording studio?
I was about 14.
Okay, so you started everything pretty young.
Yeah. And it was an awful experience. I was in this band in rugby, and everyone was older than me, and I used to get a bit bullied in the band. And my brother used to take me to rehearsal after school, my older brother. And I remember recording our first demo and listening back to it and thinking, I'm crap, I'm never going to be a drummer. And nothing was locked in. And then years later, I realised that everyone else couldn't keep in time. And I think it was me. I could keep time.
You were perfect.
Yeah,
everybody else was out.
everyone else was terrible.
Yeah. Yeah, it's probably, yeah.
And that didn't last that long.
No.
But I did have going back to the sequencing thing, I had an MMT8, a hardware sequencer in my teens as well. I think that was before I got Cubase. And so I was into the whole MIDI thing. That's how I learned MIDI, with a traditional hardware sequencer, MIDI and keyboards up and sound modules.
Yeah.
And the keys just wore out on it, and I used to have to stab it with a screwdriver to get it to play. But it was great, I think without a screen, in some ways, it made me more creative.
Yeah, right. Just using your ears.
Mm.
So, as a musician, the whole digital recording environment and digital side of music has influenced you from really, really early on.
Mm.
That's quite clear. And I didn't realise you'd started sequencing that early, and playing around with that at 11. So, as a drummer, I mean, you're very well known for electronic-based sort of rock music. I've recorded you a million times, and you look at your waveforms after you've done a drum track, and it is unbelievably tight. And that is one of your calling cards, really. You're military tight, and you play, with obviously Bullet. There's some backing, and there'll be some track there, and it's like, as I said to you earlier on, I've seen Bullet a few times now, and it is the most incredible power that comes from that. Do you think that? I've asked a few people this, but do you think your interest in the aspect of the sequencing and the electronic, the digital recording, has made a massive impact on the musician you became?
Yeah, I think so. Because you just know how things are supposed to sound, and then when you can see how they're supposed to sound, you just learn that to be a successful drummer, you've got to be consistent and have really good beat pressure, and that's got to be the priority. And in fact, when you started recording me, I was learning then, and that was what year was that?
1998.
It's probably a bit earlier, I think.
Maybe 97.
Possibly, I don't know. It was around the Pitch Shifter time, 99. I don't know. Anyway, but there was no. Was there a screen then?
No, when we were
Was
working on that in that period of time when we first started working together, we were using your Logic rig that was then the master. We were slaving to ADATs, and we were recording the drums to ADAT.
Yeah.
And then...
But we weren't looking at waveforms, were we?
No, we weren't.
We're using our ears, and I think
Yeah.
that's important as well.
Mm.
But your ears were important to detect beat pressure and beat consistency and all the rest of it, you know.
Rather than looking at the screen. And,
Yeah. So you've got to develop that skill as well, and marry the two together, really. You've got to have all skills now, haven't you? Listening and skills, as well as understanding waveforms and
Yeah, no,
how
I
they
think,
look.
well, yeah, no, I know,
Squiggly.
I agree. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of musicians tend to have found themselves in a situation where they get a record deal, they start making records, and then through that period of making records, they then start developing A, an interest, and B, the skill to start recording themselves and get a degree of engineering skills. But like you, out of all the musicians I know, you were the one that has been doing it the longest from the earliest part of their career, and I think that's quite interesting. It's almost like what came first, the sort of the chicken or the egg. It's like, as a drummer, did you make that decision, or did the fact that you've been working with sequencers a lot suddenly take over that and then influence the drumming side of things, if you see what I mean?
I think a lot of it's got to do with what music I was listening to at the time. Like with everything, you're driven by what you love. You know, what music ultimately at the time I was listening to a lot of Nine Inch Nails, which are my favourite band, and I just desperately wanted to be in a band like that, or that used sequencing, and I love the idea of playing along to electronic sounds and loops and stuff. And obviously to do that, you've got to play to a click.
Yeah.
And I think when you learn to play to a click, you prioritise timekeeping. And then when you're interested in that type of music, the electronic type of music, the industrial music or whatever, you want to sound like a machine.
Yeah.
And you almost, as a drummer, you think, well, I'm competing with this machine. It's not going to win. I want to be as powerful and relevant as the loops that I'm playing with, you know. And as a drummer, obviously, when you start sequencing, you learn how to place loops within your drum beats and play along with loops and then play on top of loops. And with Pitch Shifter, it was very loop based at the time when I joined, and I didn't just want to play the foundation beats of like a loop that was going. I didn't just want to go boo ba boo ba. I wanted to play the loop and play it with, you know, good human aggression and conviction, because I know that comes across.
Brings so much more energy.
It does, yeah. Live, you know, people can pick up on it. And so the challenge was to be as tight as possible, well, as perfect as possible to the loop, so that I became one with the loop. The loop, if you like, provided the ambience and the spirit of the genre of music, and then my drums were the dominant force, which were, you know, very transient heavy. So that was it all came from there, really. I think that was when, you know, being aggressive and machine-like and consistent came from being in Pitch Shifter first and foremost. Before that, I was always a heavy drummer, but to really, you know, test it out in a real-world environment when you start touring and recording albums and with big budgets and stuff, that was when it started properly.
So who was your first sort of named producer that you worked with?
Well, it was a guy called Ulrich Wild, and he was an engineer for Pantera. So before Pitch Shifter, I was in a band called Stimulator.
Yes.
I remember telling my now wife, meeting her dad and him asking what I did, and I said, I'm in a band. What are they called? Stimulator. Oh, let's type that into the internet, shall we? And it was like, no, please don't do that. And then all these strange objects showed up that I'd never even heard of. An Adonis pouch was one of them, I think. But Stimulator was that was when I first ventured out of the area where I live, where you live, the Vale of Evesham,
Yeah.
which is an interesting area, very rural, not a lot going on here. But that's what makes it attractive for musicians as well. And that's what helped me be creative, I think, being so isolated. But Stimulator was, I got into that from answering an ad in the back of Kerrang, and it was a London-based band. And we did actually sign to Geffen for a lot of money. And Ulrich Wild produced the album in LA. We were at Madonna's studio, I think, in Burbank. And we got dropped after 3 months. It's a typical, story, really. But it was a fun experience.
Did you? Because the thing is, as I said before, I think by the time you got to making records, you'd already worked on yourself quite a lot in areas that a lot of musicians wouldn't realise that that's an area you need to work on. They don't necessarily kind of get into that until they've worked with a producer. So the first time a lot of musicians work with a producer, they walk away going, whoa, I've really seen the light. I've kind of realised a whole load of new avenues about making a record and what it entails. Did you have that? Were you really inspired from that session? Or were you kind of like, yeah, I've kind of worked on a lot. I kind of know how all this sort of works already.
I think I definitely had confidence going into studios.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to look stupid.
Yeah.
And I wanted to come across as professional as possible, even at a young age, and make a lasting impression, because that's the key to getting work and having a ripple effect, throughout your career. So I think the click experience is the big one. Everyone wants a drummer that can play to a click now more than ever.
Yeah.
It's just recognising the fundamentals. And I think if you have a sense of what they are, and then you start getting praised by people who you work with early on, like yourself, and other producers, you realise you're on the right track, and that reinforces your skill, and you get better at it, and you focus on what's important.
So you've worked with a lot of different producers over the years. I mean, would you say there are any names there that you have actually walked away and gone, oh, actually, they made me go away and look at things completely differently, and I'm going to actually rejig a few things here, or inspired a whole new workflow or train of thought with regards to the creativity or anything like that?
No, you know what? It's always been the same sort of template. As long as you play drums consistently and in time, and you're doing your job as a drummer, then that's what's valued with every producer, I think.
Yeah.
I think probably the most important thing that was ever told to me and by a producer was by a Machine, when I was recording the Pitch Shifter album, PSI, I think it was called. And I used to go in and, play like a live drummer. And I'd been touring a lot before we went in the studio, and I was slaughtering the drum kit.
Yeah.
And, it was in time and everything. It was great. And he just said, hey, look, let's just turn the volume down by 30%. And that was a bit of a light bulb moment.
Yeah.
Because, the adrenaline was so high when I was recording. And to have someone say that, it's like, look, it's all right. You don't have to kill the drum kit.
Yeah.
It's like, oh. And then I realised, wow, it's still as powerful, but I just feel relaxed, and I've got more presence of mind to maybe listen to everything else as well, and put a bit more feel into it. And as a result, the takes sounded nicer.
Yeah.
The drums sounded nicer because I wasn't absolutely brutalising them and choking them. But everything had a better feel and was more in the pocket.
I remember when you came back, because was that in New York you did that?
It was, yeah.
I remember you talking about this like amazing high drum room that loads of really classic 80s records have been done there.
That's it, yeah. Loads of cock rock bands had recorded there. It was in New Jersey. I think it was either River Music or Water Music. I can never remember the name of it. But it was an incredible drum room. And there were so many mics.
Yeah.
And there was, obviously, that's my first introduction to the cock mic.
The cock mic?
The cock mic, yeah. A mic that points at your genitals, basically.
Yeah.
And it just the mic captured all the transients, the attack off the beater. It was positioned just over the edge of the bass drum, drummer's side. Just caught the transients of the snare drum, the toms a little bit, and the kick drum beater, and yeah, bit of an aggressive sound.
It's interesting because, which I was going to talk to you about now, that you've always, when I worked with you right from the get-go, every mic I was putting on the kit as I was miking up, well, what's that one then? What's that? You've always been really inquisitive and you've always been interested in it.
It's because I'm thick.
No, I'd say it's because you're interested. But you've got a pretty nice setup at home. You've got your room and you've got a rig that you record. Now, you do a lot of... what's the word?
Remote
recordings for people and stuff like that. So you have had to extend your knowledge.
Yeah.
And as a drummer, I think it's really helpful because I think there's more remote recording gigs for drummers than there are guitarists or, bass players, for example. I mean, there are those jobs, but I think drums are the things people need, and sometimes they're in their bedroom and they can do everything else themselves, or they can do everything themselves in a smaller studio, and then they just need that drum track. So you've obviously definitely stepped it up because you're handing over stems that, that are like, okay, this is for your record. When did that side of things start happening for you? When did you really start? I mean, as I said, when we started working together 25 years ago, you were always interested. You were always asking me, right, so what is the kick drum? How are you getting that? You'd like a snare sound. You'd be like, right, what are you doing there? What mic is that? What is that? So I know that was a beginning of it.
Yeah.
And then when did you really start stepping it up and going, right, I'm going to invest time and money into this?
I think that was about 15 years ago, maybe a little bit longer. And I started with a very basic setup. It was an Alesis sound interface with eight inputs, and then of course you realise, I'm going to need more. I'm going to need a bigger boat. And then I then progressed to getting two Focusrite interfaces, and now I've got 3.
Have you?
Yeah, and I've got 2 kits set up in my.
Is that 8 a piece? 8
it
channels?
Is,
Yeah.
And I could still do with another one. Because I've added more mics. I don't want too many mics, but 2 mics on the bass drum.
I like some of the videos I've seen you've been doing with like treated drums as well.
Oh, the processed.
Yeah. I really like all that stuff. Ash Showen does that. Is some of the stuff he does.
Oh, okay.
And it's just like there was one I watched recently. I can't remember which one it is that you did, and it was really. It inspired me, basically. It was really creative. So is that why you have multiples now for straight signal and...
Well, that's the processing is going on in the laptop, and it's a plugin. It's a mixture of plugins. One plugin's called Homicide, and it's got crazy compression, distortion, and filters all built into it. The plugin, and there's sort of so many parameters you can adjust. And I think when you're drumming along to a plugin, it inspires you to play differently.
Yeah.
You're playing to the compression and the way the distortions and the feedback's reacting. But that's all on a smaller kit that I use. A smaller kit helps me think with more clarity, and so you're not focusing on what you can hit and how many fills you can create. You're focusing on just the sound you're creating and how you can play against that. So the reason why I've got 3 interfaces is because I've got 2 drum kits mic'd up. One is like the Bullet kit, with 2 bass drums and more cymbals, and the other's a smaller, almost jazzy, hip hoppy kit.
Yeah, right. Well, that's quite interesting because I think it's again having a lot of people would probably just see you as the rock fast sort of thing, and as a songwriter, I know that you write a lot of different genres, and obviously the fact that you've got the jazzier kit implies that you use lots of different styles. So with your songwriting, when you go into that room, sometimes you'll obviously be doing things for Bullet, which will be, there's a job to do there. Sometimes you will have an email with someone going, here's a track, we want you to play on it. Then sometimes you'll go in there and go, right, well, I'm going to rehearse myself for a couple of hours just to keep in game. But then when you go and do songwriting, do you approach that room and that recording setup in a different way?
Um, well, I've got a separate room for songwriting
Interesting.
in the west wing of the house.
Nice. Nice. Bullet pays well then.
Oh yes. But it's just a small room in the garage that I write music in. So it's away from the kits. I've got
Right.
an electric kit as well, which I rarely use, but I am using it at the moment to send MIDI beats backwards and forwards to Matt, the singer
Right.
from Bullet,
Yeah,
to
yeah.
get ideas flowing and stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
So is that in the writing room, the electric kit?
no, it's in the studio room.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so this is the whole thing with sequencers, which is what we were talking about earlier. It took me a while to understand that the sequencer is your slave and you're not a slave to the sequencer. Where, when Logic, and I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here, but when Logic came out, you get entranced by all these plugins and software instruments, and over time you find yourself just arsing about for hours and not achieving anything. So I only go to the computer now when I've got a concrete idea, and that starts off in my head or on a voice note.
Yeah, I have the same problem, and I specifically addressed it because you can go into a room to get in with some songwriting and then end up spending 4.5 hours on a synth sound because you just noodle.
Yeah.
And I think it is really important when you have engineering skills and songwriting skills. As a songwriter, when you go in to do that job, you have to switch off the engineering skills because otherwise you'll faff and you'll play. Once you've written the song and you've demoed the song, then okay, put your engineering hat on and then go and make things sound more pristine and spend a bit of time on that. But I totally, because it's difficult. If I go into songwriting, it's very especially if I've been in the studio for like 3 weeks working in that environment, working with a band. My whole ear and heart is attuned to this needs to sonically be great. And when you're writing, sometimes you also need it to be sonically semi-great to get excited.
Yeah.
But you can spend a whole day playing with sounds and presets and stuff like that and go, well, I haven't actually written anything. So do you have a template, a writing template that you open up and they've got all the synths that you're probably going to use, guitar tones that you're probably going to use?
Yeah, I try and have a template, at least with all the kit channels, for when I need to record live drums.
Right.
So I haven't got to faff about with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've got go-to synths that I use. There's a synth called Pigments that I really love. Omnisphere. But I like messing about with organic sounds as well. But generally, you have to have different heads on.
Yeah.
So it's deciding what mood you're in. Like, okay, what do you want to do today? What is there to do? Well, I want to be creative. Okay, well, let's just go in for an hour, put the headphones on, and just source some good sounds and maybe record some melodies. So it's about expectations and going into the room and doing that. So that's that then, and compartmentalizing stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got to do some drum editing, drum comping. Do that. Don't get distracted. And then it might be that you've got a melody on your phone. Okay, let's try and structure a song, but let's structure the song and not get distracted by the sounds that you're going to use for the melody. And build it up in layers.
I think, that's something I've definitely learned to do, to break it down and not try and ever go into that with all the hats on. Because you come out after 8 hours and you're disappointed.
I used to do that all the time, and it just burnt me out. And you can't beat it. You can't beat how your brain is. And I dare say there's people who can just go in and rattle play with stuff and know where they're going with it straight away. But
I think, sometimes you get that anyway. You do. You'll get, what it's like. You'll get up and you'll be like, oh my God, I've got this complete idea. I know exactly where it's going. But it's funny. I was talking to George the other day, and he's working at the moment. He's doing mixing 2 albums at once, and he didn't think it was going to work for him. He thought the juggling of the two would be bad, but he's actually realised that it's actually, when you get it right and you get the balance and you sort of flip between one and the other, that can work. For me, I can't put two things in the same day. Like it's one hat per day.
It's one shoe.
Yeah, basically. I can't sort of do something up until like 1 or 2 and then take that hat off and put a different hat on and then go and do that.
Yeah.
That messes with me. So when you're working obviously when you're working at home, that's a controlled environment. That's your studio. You set it all up, you know, and as you want it. When you're in the studio, what is your ideal working environment? How do you like to go about your working day when you're in the studio?
Well, I like to start really early, which really pisses everyone off.
I'm an early bird too, yeah.
Because I'm raring to go, you know. I'm fresh, and with drums, I'm best in the morning, and I just like to attack it. If there's 10 songs to do, I want to do as many as I can in one day.
How many drum tracks in the studio would you say you comfortably do in a day?
Well, I've done 14 in a day before. That was for Andy Sneap, who's a good friend.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it makes you do 14 drum tracks in a day. Great friend
Bastard.
to have. Yeah.
But it was at a time when I was really busy and I was going in between bands, and I just had to get it done in a day.
Yeah.
To get to the next session, you know, it was a busy period. And it was tough because it was really fast metal. And by the 12th track, I was struggling, you know, because I was in there from 8 till like 10 at night.
It's physical and mental, isn't it?
It is physical and mental, yeah. But ideally, you know, 5 tracks a day is quite a nice amount to do.
You take your diet quite seriously in the studio, don't you?
I do, yeah.
You always have done.
I don't really eat that much.
Just that's it. It's starve.
Yeah.
No, I remember you used to be quite cautious.
Yes.
About, you know, and make sure you knew what you needed energy wise.
I have to keep going, because if you're playing really fast double bass drumming and you stop for half an hour, you build up lactic acid in your legs, and then it takes ages to warm back up again and to get back in the zone.
Yeah.
It can take an hour, you know, to get back in the zone, and that's just a waste of time.
So would you rather like literally be sat in the booth and be almost like pummeled by the producer and just go bang, keep going, keep going, keep going?
Yeah, that's how I like to do it.
Right.
Although I do realise there is a benefit from getting off the drum stool and going into the control room and having a listen sometimes.
Yeah.
Because then you realise, oh wow, that's better than I thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
So it is good to remove yourself out that, you know, the recording environment just a little bit, and then get back in there. But it's all about the preparation. So I spend a long time on preparing, practicing drum tracks, you know, and recording myself at home, do my own pre-production.
So you'll do a dummy run of whatever you're doing.
Yeah, definitely.
Right.
And just seeing where the weak points are, the friction points, because you can practice songs without recording them and think, oh yeah, that feels about right. But it's horrible when you're in the studio and you get a shock when you're like, oh God, that's just doesn't sound strong. That fill, you know, or that groove doesn't sound as strong as I thought it would. But
well, it's that classic thing in the studio that, you know, you can go in with songs and you go, that's the great song, and oh, that's not such a great song, and then you end up recording them and the back runner becomes the best song. And it's this weird thing of judgment, isn't it? You can really go into a weird place in the studio, and it is really important to appreciate that weird judgment can come in, and you can go like, oh, okay, I don't think this is very good, but I'm going to keep an open mind. And
it's difficult to keep the open mind as well.
Yeah.
But the prep thing is crucial, because if you don't do the prep, then you can quickly develop the that'll do attitude.
Yeah.
And that's dangerous.
Or I've given you loads of options. You can stitch something together.
You can make drum tracks out of that. I'm off. My wife's just turned up.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
I hate that. Yeah. Well, no, you'll fulfill it to the end. But yeah, I mean, every time I've worked with you, I mean, your preparation is second to none. And I think, especially now as well, it's like studio time is. No one has enough studio time for what they need to do these days, you know, so you need to try and make up time where you can. and if you can buy yourself a couple of hours on drum tracks, then that's great, you know, because you know you're probably going to lose it on vocals.
It's all about the singer.
It's all about the singer, isn't it? But sorry, carry on.
Yeah, the other thing about you know, I guess going back 10 or 15 years, I was very much right, you know, I've got to practice, get this perfect. So in the studio, record it, don't waste anyone's time, do a good job, all the focus is on physical performance, sounding great. But I have actually been caught out by having that attitude on a couple of occasions where, you know, I've done a session for someone, they've given me the tracks in advance, and I've turned up and put it down, and they've gone, actually, that's not what I was thinking for that song.
Right.
And it's thrown a spanner in the works because you've been so focused on your own at home. You're like, what? No, what? And, you know, there's a little malfunction, and you're like, okay, that's disrupted my focus now because I've got to be open, like what you were saying a minute ago.
Yeah.
You've got to be open to someone else's suggestion and then be able to change on the spot and adapt and still play really well on the spot, something new. But that's good as well because that's a learning curve, and that experience gave me more confidence to, well, nowadays if I get a session, I'll just have a very quick listen through to the songs a couple of days before, and I won't do much prep at all because I'll be confident that when I go in, I can create a take with energy that doesn't sound too contrived.
Yeah.
You know, it's all depends what it is. If it's like intricate metal where everything's got to be there and there, then the prep's relevant. But if it's like loose rock or indie or funk or something, then you kind of need a bit of that spontaneity, that freshness, don't you?
Yeah.
Otherwise it will sound a bit stiff, like someone's set themselves really, you know, narrow parameters that they have to stay in. It's like, well, no, come on, you can just relax a little bit.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to Max from You Me at 6 on the first episode, and he was talking about the whole thing about music. He said it's all about sharing when you know when you're creating and being completely open to everybody else's perception, regardless of how stuck you are or in love you are with a specific idea. Somebody else in that room could bring something to the party that's like really enlightening and really, really special. So, I mean, how long have you been in Bullet now? It's over 10 years, surely.
It's not. When was it? 2016. I sort of jumped in to session and then became a member 2017, and then there was a stint in 2010.
So you've been writing with them for about sort of 6-7 years, I suppose.
Yeah.
And so does that thing that sort of like, oh, okay, you might have had you'd be working on an idea, or there might be an idea that Matt or Padge brings to the table, and then you've kind of had an idea about it, and then they'll do that whole, no, we were thinking this, and then you have to go off on one there. Or are you in a position with them now, because you've been working with them for such a long time, where it's like there is a synergy there and you kind of all know exactly what each other are thinking, and so you tend to be on point without that experimentation?
Yeah, it's kind of got to that point, although it's dangerous to get too relaxed with it. Because things can change so quickly, you know. But I will say one thing: if someone presents an idea, you know, ultimately the songwriting revolves around Matt because he's the singer.
Yeah.
And he's got to be comfortable with the song to be able to perform and write lyrics, blah blah blah, convincingly to it. But if no one's feeling it, then it will get abandoned and we'll move on. Or, you know, so nothing's set in stone, which is quite a nice thing about Bullet, where we'll be like, well, yeah, this isn't aggressive enough, or this is too aggressive, then we'll change it accordingly, or scrap the idea, or start again.
Yeah.
So things are disposed of very quickly.
And they're put in the bin. So, for example, like as a writer, I mean, a lot of my friends are also like this. You write things and sometimes you sort of go, this is not really going anywhere. I'm going to shelve it for a bit. And then 6 months later, you'll be looking for something else, and you're looking at a hard drive and you go, what's that song called? What's that? And you open it up and go, what's wrong with this? Why didn't I finish this? This is all right. Does that ever happen with you personally?
We've tried it. Well, with me personally, it does. Yeah, it's like, oh, actually, that's good. Or I'll have a riff on the phone, and then it will make a great synth riff, or it'll inspire a melody. But with Bullet, it's like, no, it still sounds shit, and we just move on.
Yeah. Standards high. Yeah. Now that's interesting to have that, because I don't think there's a wrong or a right way on that one.
Yeah.
I do think it happens an awful lot that you can sort of bin off an idea and then 6 months, a year later, hear it in a completely different mindset. And okay, you might develop that and take it somewhere else, but
Yeah.
I often find I use those tidbits and then I feel really pleased because it's almost like you've found a fiver in the gutter.
Yeah, well, you found some lettuce in the fridge that is just a day old, but you'll still eat it.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I do like using up tidbits, definitely.
Yeah.
You know, because it might be a great riff or a great synth part, you know, that you've come up with on one of those days where you just want to be creative for an hour. So sometimes I'll start up Logic and I'll just put the guitar on and I'll just play riffs for half an hour, and there'll be a random riff project that I'll go back to.
So you just record it in, you leave it recording, just riffing.
Yeah, I don't want to get bogged down with drum sounds or getting a beat down. Just
a click.
Well, not even a click. I'll just play riffs and, you know, then I'll go back and cut out, that's good, and colour it, that's good, that belongs to that family. And then, you know, like I was saying earlier, having different heads, the mind space to start structuring things, because you've done the creative bit. Well, let's be creative in a different way now and start putting these
administering.
Families.
Yeah. That's really interesting and structured, very well structured.
Yeah.
I mean, I sort of have a similar day. I call them harvesting days.
Harvesting days.
Yeah, I have to give everything a name. And
September's busy then.
Yeah, basically.
The riff department.
My harvesting day is often I will tart around with a bit of guitar, but I'll do it to click, and I'll stock all that. And then I will also have an hour of sitting through Splice and getting nice beats to inspire. I always find a beat,
get a vibe, and
and I'll just pick out a load of things. I'll spend an hour harvesting, just downloading
after
all
you've had your Riffabix.
Yeah. I like that. Nice harvest after a Riffabix. And again, it's that compartmentalizing the hat and sort of structuring it, because it is easy to sort of sit down and go, right, I need to write and record a little song now, for whatever reason that be. And then there's so many trappings to go down, and you just spend like 8-10 hours and come out with nothing, and that's the worst feeling, isn't it? You know, when
it's horrible. But there's nothing like you write music for TV and stuff, and I've done stuff for Sky. There's nothing like a brief to sharpen your senses, where, you know, the creative beast is being tamed. And it's a love-hate thing, isn't it? It's great that you've got structure. It's like, oh, great, okay, I've got to write some hip-hop or some cinematic stuff, for instance. You know what tools to go to then, because you spent time harvesting.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between that and writing in a band. It's a weird thing, writing music in a band, where you create parameters again.
There is an audience with an expectation.
Yeah.
And that's again with the brief, there is an expectation and there is an audience, but it's a different kind of judgment. You know what I mean? It's like you're creating an atmosphere for something it's accompanying something else.
Yeah.
And I love it. I think it's really healthy, and I mean, obviously I don't write artistically like you do for a band, but do you find that by doing all that, delving into other genres through writing to brief, helps your writing chops for the rock stuff that you write, for example?
Yeah, definitely. If I'm writing my own rock stuff, or my own, you know, say if it's a metal album for Sync or whatever, then yeah, it's great, because you can pull out all your different techniques and soundscapes, if you like, that you've come across with electronic music, and create something different, because you know, metal music's it's a bit more colourful nowadays, where a lot more sounds you can introduce. You know, and
the production value's changed dramatically since we first started working on doing rock records. If you listen to those, I mean, Pitch Shifter was the precursor to it, because they were quite ahead of their time. They were using quite a lot of electronica. But if you listen to like a Bring Me record now, I mean, the production is lush. You know, it's just beautiful, like stunning.
Pop production's great, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there's some pop stuff can be really edgy.
Yeah.
More edgy and powerful than some rock bands.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely.
And it's incredible. And Bring Me have definitely brought that in, with fused it successfully with rock.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they've, as I've said before, they have changed the shape of the wheel on that, And
Yeah.
I think if you listen to modern rock records now, they sound dramatically different. The production value and all of that side of things. But it also means that because of that sort of cross pollination of pop, it means that a lot of people that weren't listening to the harder, heavier rock stuff are now listening to the harder, heavier rock stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing I like about the writing and lots of different genres is that if a brief comes in, sometimes I might not be overly well versed in that particular genre or the artist specifically. So I will have a listen to some stuff, and you listen to a guitar style, or you listen to a sort of a rhythmic style, or what have you, that you as a writer might not have ever have gone to. It wasn't in your arsenal, but because you end up doing one of these extraneous projects where it is in a genre that isn't necessarily you, and you have to go and do a bit of homework, then you effectively learn a new genre. And then my whole thing, I love cross-pollination. So if I learn a new trick in a different genre, sometimes if I'm working in the studio with an indie band a couple of weeks later, and there's a trip-hop little trick I sort of picked up, but I'll be like, I wonder if this will work, doing it a bit differently, but on the indie thing. And have you done that? Have you worked on completely different genres and then sort of gone, I could apply that to the rock thing?
Not the rock thing. What I have done is I worked on this this album for Sky, which was it was very drum based and glitchy.
Mm-hmm.
So I learned loads of new techniques in using reverse sounds with the drums and glitches, fusing electronic with acoustic drums more, and just going totally over the top with playing percussive layers. And then that helped another project that I was doing that was more hip hop based, that needed a bit of that drum ear candy, if you like.
Did you learn to physically play the glitchy stuff?
Well, I tried to, but it's quite impossible.
Really?
But I did. I played a glitchy style of like I guess trap type drums and almost dubstep type drums with like I made a snare drum out of a tom that was 8-inch tom. It was really deep, and I've screwed a wire underneath the top skin, and it sounded like a dubstep snare.
Wicked.
When I distorted it and learned all the with the left hand, and just using the top layer of that beat with a electric kick and snare sounded great.
Yeah.
And then chopping that up and then reversing it and glitching it. It's quite straightforward to do, really, but it's the artist placement.
Yeah.
And knowing when to have spacious bits, because also I had to do vocals to it as well, which was simple, but I made myself sound like a girl.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I I had to sing in a really weird way, like quite nasally, for it to sound convincing through the plugging,
right?
Which I adjusted pitch and form on to create a female voice, and actually sound. And they went for it. They don't know actually that it was me.
Did you use Alter Boy for that?
I did, yeah.
Yeah. I use it on everything. So when in doubt, Alter Boy.
Yeah, I was a hard ass American woman, basically from New York.
Love
for
that.
This song, and it sounds great. I'll do it again in a second.
Did you dress appropriately?
That's between me and the microphone.
So that actually brings me on to a question I just thought of. But have you used any AI yet with your recording?
Not with recording, but I have encountered Moises. Have you seen Moises?
No.
It's an incredible. Well, it's a website. I think you can use it in your DAW now.
Right.
But you basically put any song into it, and it processes the song and separates all of the instruments. So you have stems of the song.
Wow.
It's unbelievable. Brilliant for drummers, because, well, any musician, you can create play-along tracks. And,
Yeah.
I've done a couple of covers, actually, at the start of the year. A Metallica one and a Slayer one.
Amazing.
And, when I was a kid, Dave Lombardo was my hero, and Lars Ulrich, and I could finally hear the drum tracks on their own.
And you wouldn't... Because, there's become a real fashion now. I mean, I've downloaded a load of them of famous stems, of like famous golden oldies. And the multi-tracks, they're just brilliant because you can hear all the spill and you can like hear the drummer groaning like and all that, which is brilliant.
Yeah.
So on the AI, you're not going to get that, surely.
You know what? I haven't used it on any vintage recordings,
Right.
but it is authentic.
Yeah, right.
You can hear all the little timing errors in the drumming, which are cool because that's what creates the energy.
Yeah.
You realise, wow,
There's a push there.
There's
and
a push. That's so
yeah.
fast, and there was no click back then for
Yeah.
the songs I was using.
Yeah.
But it means you can obviously fuse stems with the stems from other songs, and it's a remixer's wet dream.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know,
Have you started doing any of that yet?
No, but I might do.
Yeah, that sounds a lot of fun.
Oh, it just should be crazy. I think the future is, the DJ decks, the high tech DJ decks, where you mix songs and whatever. I'm not a DJ, so I sound like an idiot. Imagine if you had that in a pair of decks.
Yeah.
Where you're mixing stems,
live,
not songs, live.
That would be pretty cool. Actually,
that's the future.
You've probably just coined that now, and somebody else is going to go and run with it.
Damn.
And make millions.
AI is a step ahead, isn't it?
It is. It's frightening. I've yet to play with it. I want to play with it a little bit more in this recording environment. It's just something I need to get around to doing.
There are AI vocalists you can hire.
Really?
So the sound of John from Texas or Louise from, I don't know, Birmingham.
Yeah. Yeah.
So these are AI, I think, voices that have been sampled, and you sing and your voice takes on
theirs. Yeah. Have you heard the AISIS album?
I haven't, no.
That's an
AISIS.
Yeah. It's basically the Oasis album that they never made. And it's really good.
Is it?
Yeah.
Is it better?
And it's really good.
Oh, right.
But yeah, the vocals sound incredible. Like the nuance behind Liam and everything. It's just like,
and it's AI generated.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty scary.
It is scary.
So in your recording career, which seems to have roughly been about 75 to 80 years between the two of us.
Yes.
Your best and worst moments in studios.
Oh, wow. Best moments in the studio. I felt really good after recording drums for the last Bullet album because I'd done so much prep to it, and that it was, it was challenging, and I was really pleased with how it turned out. But there was an album called Axe Wound. Well, the project was called Axe Wound with me and Matt, and it was we did it after my first stint with Bullet in 2010. Matt wanted to do a really heavy Slipknot based project, and he said, right, let's book a studio, we'll just go in for 2 weeks and do an album.
Amazing.
So we went in there, and we wrote a song every day, and it just involved me playing beats, and he was just sat in the control room playing riffs. And I loved the way that he wrote. It was another learning curve, because I just jam out a song on the drum kit. In my head, it was like, okay, that's the verse. I'm just going to go into what I feel would be a chorus now. I just go purely on instinct. And he'd be putting really rough riffs down. I was like, how's that going to sound then? And I didn't really know him at that point, how he worked in the studio. And so, by about tea time, we'd have a song, and I was obviously knackered because I was playing double bass drumming all day, and we were going backwards and forwards a bit. And then it would be like, okay, now I record it properly. I was like, oh my God, I've got nothing left.
Yeah.
So I'd have to record this song that we made up that day, do a proper take of it for the album.
Wow.
And that was really difficult. That was challenging.
Yeah.
We did that for about a week or so up until Christmas. And then I think we had about 7 songs by that point. So after Christmas, I went back before he got to the studio and I listened to my drum takes. I was like, right, I'm doing it all again. So I did it all again in a day, the 7 songs.
Yeah.
Because I'd had time to relax and for everything to process. So I kind of knew where the movements were and where the friction points were, and I was ready, and I performed it then. So that was satisfying. And then we carried on and wrote the album, everything recorded in 2 weeks.
That's amazing.
Finished. So that was good.
So
good.
Written and recorded.
Written and recorded, yeah.
In 2 weeks?
Yeah.
So how many songs were on the album?
12.
That's incredible.
It was brilliant. It was pure instinct, and I love the album. Machine produced it. I love the drum sound on it. It's so raw.
Yeah.
And we said, you know, if any timing errors, just keep them in there because we want it to sound raw and
Yeah,
real. And I think for Matt, it was a good release because from Bullet World, everything has to be perfect and a bit more high pressure.
Yeah, but the two of you are also monstrously tight. So
Yeah.
I can't imagine it was that baggy.
Well, his right hand he's so tight.
Yeah.
You know, his
Yeah.
rhythm playing is
Incredible
incredible,
guitarist, yeah.
really good, and it's just a joy to play with when you're playing, you know, double bass
Yeah,
drum
right.
stuff.
Yeah.
And it just locks in instantly. So it's never going to sound really crap.
Yeah.
There's gonna always be an element of tightness, and I think just leaving it, you know, untouched, just added to the energy really.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, that was really satisfying, and also hard as well. I wouldn't say it wasn't fun; it was just challenging.
Yeah, but you get to a level, I think, with experience, and you've dedicated your life to drumming. You've got this good for good reason. You find yourself, it's going to be difficult to get challenged. Do you know what I mean? It's not much can challenge you. You've ticked a lot of boxes. You've got a lot of experience. You've done a lot of things, and I think it is important to challenge yourself all the time. You know,
You do, yeah, definitely. And I mean, I'm the one that challenges myself, you know, because if I don't, then I might as well give up. And so I challenge myself now by looking at up and coming drummers, and you know, because they keep you on your toes, and you can't deny that there's some very exciting young talents out there.
Yeah.
Music, drummers, guitar, whatever, and you've got to look at that with an open mind, the same open mind you had when you were younger, and learning off older drummers. So you've got to always keep your eye on that.
yeah, left and right.
Yeah,
you
know,
yeah.
and you can learn off any age,
Yeah.
whether anyone, you know, whether it's a teenager, someone in their 20s, 30s, 70s, or whatever.
Yeah.
So just keeping that mind open.
Yeah. So you must have a studio horror story at some point in your career. I mean, you said the first one wasn't great, but I mean, the thing is, though, I mean, every time I've ever been in the studio with you, it's always been successful. We've got everything we needed to be done in time, and it sounds great. So it wouldn't surprise me if you haven't got any.
There's not really been any awful moments. The first experience I had in the studio was probably the worst because I just felt like I couldn't play, you know, and that was crushing.
Yeah.
Because I thought I was Lars Ulrich when I was 14 years old.
As you do when you're 14.
And it was just a reality check. And I think it's just learning the hard way, isn't it?
Yeah.
But you have to learn the hard way when you're young.
Yeah, it is. It is important. But I mean, I think that the interesting thing is that it is a point to make that one of the reasons you probably haven't got any sort of real personal low points in the studio is because you have always treated the studio with respect and preparation, and like far earlier than I think you learnt about the recording situation much earlier than a lot of musicians do, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, it's about. I have got one story which was I felt quite unpleasant about where I was playing with this Scottish band called Hiding Place. Lovely bunch of lads, a little bit younger than me at the time. And they signed a big deal, and I was, you know, in the zone and probably too militant in the studio. And they were writing songs as they were going in the studio, which was quite alien to me because I was heavily in the session world at that point. So my mindset was different to, you know, being in a band. And I was on a deadline. I had to go and record this other album, the one that I had to do 14 songs in a day, and they didn't want to write songs this particular day. They wanted to watch the Celtic football match in the Champions League. And I told them they couldn't. And they kicked off a bit.
Did they?
Quite rightly, you know, because
yeah.
you know, I was thinking about myself at the time. I was like, I've got to get this done because I've got to get out of here.
Yeah.
And this isn't professional, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, the producer was a guy called Al Clay who did I think. That was he was Hans Zimmer's assistant as well. And he said, look, Jace, just relax. It's just bands, all right? I was like, okay, you're right. And and they got upset and told me I was out of order. I was really out of order. I apologised. I was like, yeah, sorry guys, because my sort of regimented way of working got in the way of the vibe then. I kind of regretted that at the time.
Yeah.
Because you can't kill the vibe in a studio when people are trying to be creative. So yeah.
It's a happy balance, isn't it?
It is,
Yeah. Yeah.
But you learn,
You do.
You have to chill out a little bit.
You do. Jace, it's been amazing having you on the podcast. Thanks so much for coming on.
Pleasure talking with you, Matt.
And hopefully see you very, very soon.
Absolutely.